It's episode 342. I'm sorry that we did not have an episode last week. I spilled chalky milk in my computer. Burger King foot lettuce. Yiska, how you doing?
Pretty good. Yeah. I know we missed the finals. I think especially the European one was pretty entertaining. Not so much for the NA one, I think, even though Gator will have you believe it was close. I mean, for a 4-1, it was close, I would say. But yeah, otherwise, I mean, we're kind of in a lull, right? Between
honestly, to peel back the curtain for a moment and talk about how the sausage is made, I came in today fully expecting to dive into the predictions of the upcoming Dallas Major. And Eric, beautiful producer behind the scenes, is like, Joe, you're stupid. That doesn't happen for another month. And I'm like, oh, okay, then let's not talk about that then. And we'll save that for another day. So we will be talking about Dallas, trust and believe. Yeah, lull. It's what else is there to do right now? There's plenty of news to talk about, which we'll get into today. It's a news episode, not a ton of nitty-gritty stuff to get into, but yeah, not a ton of goings-ons right now, and it feels kind of, I don't know, bad? Question mark? Is that crazy?
Yeah, I will say, like, esports in general is kind of boring, dude. Like, most days, you never know or realize how little is going on in esports until you have to write news pieces. And it's like, sometimes it's actually challenging to source any meaningful content for that day, because there's just nothing that newsworthy that really happened unless you're a drama farmer, right? So I don't think in this esport in particular, and I guess we can talk about that a little bit later, but this week, especially with the team pickups, it feels like there's a little bit more going on than previously, but otherwise, like, there's only so much going on, and that's a big problem, right? And as an entertainment product.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I think you've pretty eloquently talked about this, both in your personal work, but also on this show about the battle for the attention span, right? And Overwatch just is not producing enough to really challenge for any kind of like attention grabbing stuff. We build a little momentum. Maybe we'll build some steam after Dallas, get a live event in. People are excited. And then there's another lull, there's just nothing to fill those stopgaps, and no, Timmy in the chat. The Face It League is not something that we're going to sit there and consume. Let's be honest. I can also imagine that you're a contender supporter, I would imagine. As we all know, everybody loves to sit there and watch contenders, as shown by the viewership. No shade to contenders, but everybody said that they if everybody that claimed they watched Overwatch contenders did, then maybe we would be in the position that we're in now.
Okay,
that being go ahead.
You wanted to go in for the patrons, because like now I feel like now there's a topic that could lead into, but if you want to get to
okay, well, pin that then, and then we'll just get through the patrons real fast. 342. We love you so much, guys. Thank you for still supporting the show after 342 episodes. They are Refine Bean, Bronze, Babu, Heloshin, Rex Zane, Sasquatch, and our YouTube members. I am DRW, Brother Adam L, Ice M Jello, Fireman 6, and AK. Thank you for making the show possible. Thank you for supporting us over the years. Yiska, contenders, pin it, unpin it. What are we
in terms of viewership, right? Like, there was recently, like, I think Esports Charts released like a breakdown of viewership of OWCS and A stage 1. I think it was somewhere in the 30s average viewership, 30Ks average viewership, and it's of course not great, right?
Yeah, of course.
It did not include all co-streams in terms of like all platforms. It usually just considers Western platforms. I think the Asian stages were like pretty much all regions were reasonably close in average viewership.
Okay.
And you just gotta say that, I mean, the table was kind of set, for if
Yeah.
Overwatch was to pop off, then there would have been opportunities in the future. Now you got to question whether or not that's the case. And let me bring those up. Let me make it readable. Here we go. Yeah, and this is just like a comparison, even though I don't even feel that the comparison is really apt here. But yeah, it's like peak viewers 61K, and it's really about the averages, right? And yeah, the problem is, or rather the opportunity was, that currently we're experiencing in the wider esports space, there's a lot of movement in the market for third-party tournament organizers, right? So you would have to say, looking at the market, that they're currently or tournament organizers like Blast, like Starladder, like PGL. These are the other ones that aren't EFG, the big mega corporation. And they are expanding. Like Blast just announced the other day that they are joining Dota. I know they're already in Rainbow Six and whatnot, right? And it, especially in Dota, if you look at the circuit, it's a much more healthy one now, right? Like you have multiple tournament organizers just like complementing the circuits that build up to TI and give circuit points and whatnot, right? And that would have ideally been like if Overwatch had performed, I'm sure there would have been tournament organizers looking at this going like, why not take a shot at it? I'm not sure if 30, 40K viewership is enough to inspire confidence in that case. Now, maybe it will be different depending on what Dallas produces, given that it's an offline event. Yeah. And they're mainly concerned with the online viewership during those tournaments, of course, as tournament organizers. So maybe it's a little early, but like we're sort of cruising towards viewership numbers that are unlikely to see interest from these other third-party tournament organizers that could complement the entire schedule over the year. And I think ideally you also want OWCS to not be the only top dog in town or the EWC, right? And it is also unfortunately turning to a situation where increasingly so it is all about EWC in this esport. And other esports, to be fair, are also experiencing that identity crisis. We had one of our great journalists wrote a piece about basically what happened in Dota was they de-emphasized TI and lowered the prize pool or the crowdfunding efforts, and therefore EWC has a higher prize pool now than very likely TI, right?
That's kind of crazy to think about.
That in itself sort of reframed the scene, right? Like there will always be people that care about the income, of course, and that conveys meaning to them. Others say, okay, TI has such a rich history. It is the pinnacle event. It's where all the circuit points lead for our scene. Winning TI is still the most meaningful. And the problem is, like, for TI, at least you have a decade or more history to have that meaning conveyed. None of that is inherent in the OWCS system. There's no, boasting points from the Overwatch League that's sort of transferred over to OWCS. And that makes it so that we're seeing teams behave accordingly, like Twisted Minds, who are just phoning it in OWCS in order to maximize their chances for EWC, right?
Yep.
So there's sort of like a two-prong issue here in that Overwatch has not attracted enough viewers, I think, yet, and is unlikely to do so during MLG. Sorry, not MLG Dallas.
DreamHack does feel Dallas. Like an MLG though.
Yes, DreamHack Dallas. Unless it's going to be interesting how that turns out. Of course, you kind of get a second chance seeing. I mean, there's an outside shot where like people watch EWC and jump from game to game during the broadcast and get sort of interested in Overwatch there. But it's just rather unlikely to see hockey stick growth rate numbers in the viewership at this point. And it is sad that this is likely to mean that these third-party tournament organizers that are innovating, right, that are bringing new ideas to these other scenes, like a Blast that innovated heavily in CS and are looking to innovate heavily in Dota, are unlikely to get into Overwatch and have a little bit of a competition between EFG and Blast and whatever other tournament organizers you might have. I'm only naming the Western ones. There's also definitely like the potential for Asian tournament organizers to compete, and to a degree that is already happening with WDG and EFG, where I would argue WDG has presented the better product overall, pretty significantly so, based on format, production, and the ability to host offline events. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, they have not been rewarded to the degree, and that just does not tell an enticing story that could attract these other tournament organizers that would inevitably uplift the scene with the competition that they bring, and furthermore emphasizes EWC as the de facto World Championship title for this game, because that's just clearly what teams care about at this point, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's no incentive for them to care otherwise, like they are here to win the biggest events, the biggest prize pool with the most, eyes on it. And that currently, at least for Overwatch standards, is the Esports World Cup. When you talk about the lack of third-party tournament investment, is it fair to point any fingers? I'll put it that way, right? Like, I think you and I would both probably really, maybe wag a finger or two at Blizzard's way, where it's like we knew this was going to be one of the most, if not the most important year to kind of set the tone for esports or Overwatch esports moving forward post the Overwatch League. And it is patently clear that Blizzard is not really around in the way that they kind of need to be.
Yeah. Thing is, it's like, yes, there's a responsibility there. There's a responsibility from the community.
Sure.
And unfortunately, I feel like it's just like, I think whatever Blizzard does now is not even that important in terms of their responsibility, but what they did before with the Overwatch League, what kind of fans they attracted, what kind of product demand they created, what the game looks like, what the tone is. And it's just in terms of that, like the stories that this able to tell and the audiences that it has attracted, there's very clearly an appetite for a different type of storytelling than we ordinarily had in Overwatch Esports, I would say. So, at least at this point, where the audience is much more fractured.
Yeah.
So as the production went, as the polish went, as the happy-go-lucky storyline production and the large-scale, like, the traditional sports angle went, the more esportsy stuff that is now doing objectively the best, like, for instance, Uncoachable is the most popular Overwatch podcast, right? Those players that are, or rather in that vicinity of a little bit more critical, fun, edgy content is clearly the stuff that is working more. By the way, most other esports scenes are more like this, at least the ones that work, right? Maybe not the League as much, but for instance, CS is 100% like this, right? The more hands-off your developer is, the more space it gives to be a bit more daring, and it's a clear selection process in the revenue streams that get there, what kind of sponsors you get, fair enough. But if your developer is still interested in having this game as like a marketing tool, which at this point is true for Overwatch, there are certain limitations for the broadcast, right? So, I'm still like, yes, you would have to say that this perennial discussion that I cannot like. I almost hate every single comment section just regurgitating points of how Overwatch is not a great esports to watch, and I kind of contributed to that issue. Yeah. Like I remember writing that news about the Vitality owner saying as much, while he of course was negotiating with a team. Go figure. I think like the point is kind of overblown. Really, it's about stories first and foremost. It's about the drama of the stories, and it almost doesn't matter as much what the esports is like for everything but getting people in. Now, we have a lot of folks playing this game, but the conversion rate is still awful in comparison, right? It's still about the quality of the stories that are being told and the drama and the stickiness of those stories. And there is a lot of growth potential there. So, yeah, I think like it's just always going to be a molasses trying to do the post-owl stuff with post-owl mindsets, just like still sort of on those rails when third-party tournament organizers would have a chance to bring the specific expertise into this scene. But unfortunately, it's not hitting critical mass where we could get other professionals in and sort of have that competition, brainstorm new ideas on how to tell stories about Overwatch. And there's very few opportunities left where you could even be enthusiastic or optimistic about where growth would come from. There are a couple, right? Like China coming in, maybe there's a tournament organizer that wants to do international events. There's a potential of Dallas popping off, or even EWC, as I said. Like there are a couple of situations. It's also going to be interesting how the team angle revolves, but equally, there are much more real chances of this nosediving more, considering, and this is our segue into the other topic, I would say, is that there are teams that are currently considered big organizations in Overwatch that have not gotten into the EWC club support program, therefore making it less opportune for these teams to keep their teams. Now, they will still want to have their top teams in order to get a higher ranking in the EWC club championship, right? So namely, I'm talking about ENCE and MAT here, right? None of these teams are very likely to win the event, probably are not even likely to make top 3, I would say, at the EWC, right? So there's only limited utility to them if they are not getting into that EWC program, where other organizations such as Space Station Gaming, for instance, got in, right? Yeah. So, yeah, the question is, like, is there longevity for these organizations to stay here, or would they just not take a look at Overwatch, given that they didn't get into the EWC, right? And after the EWC, they're just out. It's a real possibility to consider. Of course, now their investment in ENCE's case is not that big. I think that's more considerable for MAT, considering they have two Koreans over in NA. They are paying much more competitive salaries. Not great ones, but like okay ones. So that there, I would have to imagine there are real questions being asked about the feasibility. But yeah, it's a tough one. I'm not sure if should I quickly explain what the EWC club program is?
Yeah, I mean, because that's kind of the natural, and we kind of talked about this prior to the show, where obviously in the news section we will get to a lot of these teams coming in, spending a bunch of money. Fnatic's announced that they're going to step back into Overwatch. We don't know exactly where they're headed, but they're here. TSM picking up Timeless, if memory serves. Teams. And there's obviously some very big rumors coming out of China. Potentially LGD's back in the space. Who knows? We'll keep you posted on that front. But there is like this big push that we're starting to see as time goes on for teams now that the club program stuff is kind of becoming more and more public. Teams are kind of spending the money that they're getting, obviously, dependent on if they're in the program or not, and if they're just wanting to get in Overwatch for whatever reason. But is it, we were talking if it was specifically tied to the Esports World Cup, if it was, something else. I think there is info.
I think we first have to explain what the program is before we get into the intricacies. So, sometime in February, the Esports World Cup Foundation announced that they would invite 22 esports teams globally directly into the program, and 6 more would be invited. It ended up being 8 more because there were 177 applications to the Esports World Cup Foundation. By the way, they also changed the name. That also threw me for a loop. It was definitely called Club Program. They now called it Club Support Program. Okay, even the graphic that we have up here says Club Program. It just somehow turned into Club Support Program. Whatever. And the basic pitch here is we do not know any details on the contingencies of these programs, but the basic idea that is communicated is that it allows teams to square brackets re-enter esports that they had either previously or never been part of, and field teams and encourage and incentivize teams to be lean more into the multigaming aspect. And there's specific reasons why one might infer that to be the case. Some say, well, it increases the attractiveness of the Esports World Cup because there's more teams that have more different squads in every competition. Therefore, it makes the World Club program much more attractive. But also keep in mind that because it's all sort of under the umbrella of the Saudi Arabian Public Investment Fund, that there is a lot of overlap in how EFG, and a Savvy Games Group company, which is a PIF organization, and then the Esports World Cup Foundation also is, how they benefit from each other. Of course, EFG does all of the organization for that event, or a lot of it, and a lot of the qualifiers run through it. So there's a more than usual collaboration than you would have between not unaffiliated companies. So the stipend basically is that you get a 6-figure payout for 2024. It's a one-time payout to enter these games. Whatever other stipend you get in the following years is currently unknown, right?
Okay.
Now, it is, once again, about re-entering titles and then to expand also into other markets internationally and then create novel content around that. That's the pitch. Now, it kind of depends on what you believe that cash injection to be aimed at, right? Some say it's just to increase to increase the effect or the quality of the EWC. I disagree that this program even establishes that. I think you could have just thrown even more prize money in it and had more teams try to compete in more esports and could have gotten depending on how the point system works between those, could have created incentives there. Like if you make Overwatch as important as CS, that inherently already injects meaning for organizations into that, right? Because there is a competition for teams. It's a $21 million prize pool for the Club World Cup champion, where they are going to have some formula that aggregates the performances of one esports or each esports organization against one another. Now, it is assumed that there is some weighting between the esports. If there's not, that it already incurs some more importance to these fringe games. It's currently 19 games of course, like you would say, winning in CS, winning in the League, winning in Dota is much more prestigious and should therefore incur more points than winning in Overwatch comparatively.
Mm-hmm.
We're currently not aware if that's the case, but that would have been my argument. That's how you put just more money into the club championship, get more meaning or more desire of organizations to compete because of that, and then just have every esport be roughly the same or just the weighting be slightly off, and that would have automatically injected meaning into these scenes as well. You would have not had to do the entire club foundation as club support. Okay. The other thing is, what is the stipend contingent on? Now, you could argue that it is in the PIF's interest to sort of bind organizations to not just drop everything after the EWC is done, because keep in mind, there are a lot of scenes of those 19 games where EFG, ECL Faceit Group, also a PIF company, is doing either white label or their own production, right? Like ESL is in Dota, ESL is in CS, ESL is in Overwatch, right? Like they are producing for a ton of companies. Keep in mind they were also in Rocket League. I wonder why that game allegedly only has 250k, because they got it recently taken off them, and now Blast does it, right? Psych. But yeah, but basically, like there is a world where whatever you have to pitch in order to get the money out of the club support program is not just we're going to blow the entire six-figure number you give us on a squad, and then after August we're going to drop everything, because that's not technically in the interest if you want to support EFG, which the club foundation might want to do. Also, I personally believe that the money that they're spending is, if you look at esports, it is very hard, even if you have money, to find assets with longevity, right? What asset class could you put money into and hope to create value? And unfortunately, esports orgs are one of the better ones at it, right? Like, it's not great. It's pretty shit, actually. Think about how much money was pissed against the wall in the ZERP era.
Yeah.
But if you want to survive or have longevity and build esports as an industry, you gotta have some asset class that survives game switches, that survives ebbs and flows of games, that has some controllable properties around them. And there's nothing like else, right? Like you cannot control individuals to that degree.
For a moment, because I think that's, we talked about this prior to the show, and that kind of caught me up, and I had to kind of think through it verbally. Like, when you talk about an asset class, right? If I'm to understand you correctly, that's more of just to boil it down so that it's kind of digestible for the listeners. It's more of like an institution that you can kind of put money in, and it will provide some kind of value. Correct? Is that like a fair general way to kind of describe it?
Yeah, just like think of like a thing. That has roughly the same form, right? Like, not every esports organization is roughly the same company, but like that's the idea here, yeah.
And like, again, audio listeners, viewers, whoever, like, I challenge you to think about that. Like, if you had fuck you money and you had to give it to something to produce like something of value, what is there that you can really like tap other than esports organizations? You can't do the media for obvious reasons, on top of conflict of interest problems. You can't do any kind of like content company, because that's just a shot in the dark and already kind of loops back into,
I mean, you could, but like there's only so much, right?
Exactly. And on top of that, esports orgs are already kind of becoming content little hubs to begin with. So why not just do that anyways? So it all kind of loops back to the idea that esports organizations provide more value than almost anything else in the market that's at least accessible. Yes, obviously developers can have their say, but that's more private, right? That's kind of the idea.
I mean, also just like you might be able to come up with better answers like developers, right? The PIF does this as well. Savvy Games Group has development studios, right? they have shares in a lot of developers around the world, right? Like that's already done, right? Like that's already a thing. They have TOs, right? Like they just announced that they're not looking to make more acquisitions in the esports sector. Now, a lot of people interpreted that as to say, "Oh, we're already like fucking over esports." That's not necessarily true.
Right.
They just fucking bought everything that made sense, right? They bought the biggest tournament organizer, third-party tournament organizer in the space, or rather, multiple. You know, they bought DreamHack, they bought a Vindex, which is the company that owns Esports Engine, formerly like a lot of guys from the MLG crowd that left Blizzard, right? They bought ESL, which is Turtle Entertainment. That was basically the biggest third-party tournament organizer in the wider esports space. And they also bought Faceit, and then they just merged it under EFG. And that's now like a 1.5 billion or more third-party tournament organizer that is running a fuckload of white label and own productions in the esports sector. So that's already covered, okay? You're running diminishing returns, just putting more money into the same sector. What are you going to do? Also buy Blast? At some point, there's also going to be some regulatory bodies looking at it, going like,
sure,
you're just buying,
it's also
going to
not
buy
smart.
every tournament organizer, right? Like, okay, so yes,
they also want competition as well.
Probably just like a tier 3 asset class, the teams, but also you kind of cannot have esports without teams, right? And
100%.
Therefore, it makes some sense. I'm just wondering what kind of insurances were made. Now, 177 teams signing up means basically everybody did.
Yes, correct.
Everyone,
almost everybody did.
Right? Like, and I wonder if anyone will ever come out and say no, because unless you own your team and do not have investors, you have a very hard time justifying that to your investor class. Yeah. Like, what are you going to say? We turned down free money because XYZ, that reason that is not like monetarily quantifiable? That doesn't work. Yeah. I mean, if you wanted to do that, you now have to bang the drum that they didn't do that and have to get some social brownie points in order to get some value back based on that, right? Maybe it's the exit plan. But
hey, who knows? That's a real possibility. I think there's some other esports orgs, especially in North America, that would and could bang that drum, and I would imagine if they're going to, it would be sometime soon.
Yeah, it's very unlikely that anyone did, right? If we're being honest.
I have to imagine not. And again, that was something that we kind of talked about too, because in this article that you posted, it kind of starts to break down some of the teams that were accepted. And as we go through them, there's some notable ones that are surprising. And maybe it's the absence of other ones that also kind of undercuts that.
So, okay. Top down, it starts out with 100 Thieves, which is interesting because they gave an interview, or sorry. They posted a comment on Reddit that the esports advocates picked up on. And the basic statement here was that 100 Thieves is part of it, but they're currently not locked in to compete in any of the EWC tournaments. Now, a lot of people interpreted that to mean that this is a willing, like that's an intentional decision. Brother, their teams just suck. The only esport where they have any chance to do it, from my understanding, is COD, where they're good in. But COD is not even at the Esports World Cup for obvious reasons. So they suck too much and have not picked up enough teams in those other esports, which they still might before the Esports World Cup.
I'm sure they will, yeah.
That they just, like, they were accepted because they're Cloud.org. And let's be honest, like, if you know anything about Nadeshot, that's also not a guy that is principally opposed to taking free money, especially from that crowd. So, like, there's no moral reason for them. They just suck. Okay?
Love that.
Cloud9, of course, the former ownership group of London Spitfire got in. FaZe Clan, well, Atlanta FaZe is still different. It's not the same. It's just like a collaboration. Gaming Gladiators is one of the
that one stunned me. I've never heard a fart from a gaming gladiator.
Gaming gladiators are basically the most dominant Dota 2 org of the last 2 years. They won an absurd amount. Did not win TI, but yeah.
Now let me get a temperature check from you. Let me pause you there. Gaming gladiators, I feel like it's kind of just an easy in for North American Overwatch, no? Like easy, just slide right in there. You already had a gladiator. You could pick up some kind of like mid team that may or may not have some potential, you know? Is there any kind of temperature?
The problem is you're kind of running out of teams that could even accrue any sort of points.
Agreed. Yeah.
There's what are you going to do? Pick up SOG? Like that's,
I guess,
whatever. Possible, not likely, right?
Sure.
But I will say, like gaming gladiators, since probably kind of knowing that they're going to be accepted, expanded a fuck ton, right?
Okay.
they have like 8 esports teams now, or 9, and like 6 of them came in February 2024, late and later, right? It's very obviously a thing because of the club program.
Yeah.
NRG, that's our friends from the San Francisco Shock, Andy Miller and whatnot.
Hey there.
Space Station Gaming, we know those guys. That's now in Overwatch. Team Liquid, actually was never only like before.
Yeah.
For
been a minute.
But now, like they didn't get into Overwatch League, so whatever, right? TSM is back.
TSM is back with Timeless.
That's interesting because like they had like 9 employees left. Of course, famously sold their LCS spot. For those that are not general esports fans, they were the North American esports organization in League of Legends for the longest time, but then sold their slot and had a whole thing with FTX. Were valued the most, the largest or most expensive esports organization, then went down to lineup, you know the drill, in esports. Now, Furia Loud, not that interesting for Overwatch, I think, because I don't know what the Brazil scene does. Neither are Blacklist International. Talon Esports, of course, was in Overwatch. Given the scene, the state of the Pacific scene, very unlikely. Genji, well, they are kind of in the process of...
They're kind of scorned?
I mean, they want to get an academy team going, right? Now, LGD, that's the organization that's rumored to pick up that Chinese squad for where they already have a slot, basically guaranteed for EWC. That's just probably going to be the Gushu mix. T1 was the former Philadelphia Fusion. Weibo Gaming, they weren't as affiliated with Overwatch. Fnatic, likely to pick up Yeri, as we heard. And we will get a little bit more into those. G2, by the way, was very early in Overwatch Esports. Numlocked was part of G2 for a while. Guild Esports is a joke. That's the David Bickham org. They're basically bad in everything. I'm not even sure where they're going to expand into.
Do you remember? For Guild, do you remember their Valorant roster? Like it was like such an overly produced, like it was Guild great, Esports. Yeah. It was such a I hoped that they worked because their content brains were there, but it just feels like a money just at the wall. Hope it sticks. It hasn't, but at least now you get free money, I guess.
Yeah. Coming Corp is like a French org. Now here,
big French org.
I won't get like I will only mention the other Overwatch orgs, but Koi is actually part of Overactive Media, who are owned by or who are the ownership group of Toronto Defiant, and that one I don't know what to think about because I had an interview with Adam Adamu, and at the time he said that he was under no NDA for the Esports World Cup. Now, it's very possible that he was not the guy negotiating with the... It was rather like... It's possible that this is something that Ibai does and whatnot. Maybe like he danced around the subject a little bit. I'm not saying he lied to me at that point, right? It's just like a little bit of an interesting situation given that the line of questioning that I had with him, and that the fact that they now end up being on that list is interesting. To be fair, he never said that they wouldn't participate in that, right? And then, yeah, I mean, Falcons is here. Twisted Minds is here. Team Vitality, I mean, said it's boring, but then tried to get FTG. Like, the other ones are very unlikely to pick up Overwatch rosters. Maybe NIP, but who knows, right? OG, the only reason why you might think OG might be one of them is because I still think Damon, former Valiant, is still there.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I think he's in business development now. He knows Overwatch. He knows there's
no business to develop here, so stay the fuck away.
So, in terms of opportunities for these organizations to invest in Overwatch, it's just not a lot. It's just not a great one. And for a lot of them,
top of that, and I think you've talked about this in the past, but people also have to remember that, like, other esports, you can just sign a player and not a team.
Yeah. Yes.
It's kind of expensive to get an Overwatch, and it's not doing well.
Brother.
So
I don't even. People don't understand. Like, if this was still 6v6, just the psychological hurdle of going, wait, this esports does not get a lot of viewership, and it's one more guy than League of Legends. Like that.
Why would I?
Like, of course, like the upkeep is only one more guy, but the psychological thing behind that, going like, even like at this point, like most other esports do not really have bench players as like a necessity.
Oh, that's a unique thing to us.
Yes, like it is pretty wild how much upfront cost you need for Overwatch, right? So yeah, and if it was still 6v6, Dunzo, my friends, like bag on your knees that this never goes back to a 6v6. But yeah, I think it's unfortunately the growth potential is, and the potential that other organizations other than those that we will discuss will pick up teams is just very unlikely at this point.
Yep. Agreed. And on top of that, like you mentioned, there's not too many other teams to pick up that would provide any kind of value.
Also true, yes.
Yes, there are teams. For sure. If somebody wants to pick up Pirates in Pajamas, be my guest. But what is that really going to do for you?
You would have to go to Korea and hope, like, I don't know.
That's your best shot. But even then, there's just limited performance. And again, Yiska kind of did allude to this. We can't necessarily focus too heavily on the Esports World Cup. That will matter in the rules of how these stipends work. But there probably is other reasons why this, why these teams are accepted, why this club program exists. I think the obvious one is to look at the Esports World Cup, but like Yiska mentioned, it's not the end all be all. It kind of can't be, because if it was, then the second that the Esports World Cup ends, all the teams get dropped and they move the budget elsewhere, right? If I'm to understand the kind of fallacy there. So that doesn't make for an entirely healthy, system. So
I mean, once again, we don't know if they would drop it. I think like the likelihood here is that ENCE and MAT might think otherwise, but we do not know about the contingencies of the esports club support program, and if it is long, like, God forbid if it isn't, right? Like if they just go like, well, it's September now, it's 10 more months until the EWC, do what with the money, like you spend all your money and now whatever, right? Like rebuild please in February next year or something.
It always screamed. That's because that's how I felt like it was going to go regardless with the Esports World Cup prior to like the club program support bullshit. It kind of reminded me of like WoW's like Mythic Dungeon stuff, where like as we get closer to the event, teams are picked up by esports organizations, and then after the event, especially with it was like this in the past with like the Race to the World First stuff, I think, in WoW, where, as we get close to the event, teams get picked up. As we leave the event, teams get dropped. Like, there has to be something else for these these clubs to participate in, or why have them?
Unless and the other things are the EFG tournaments. Right?
Exactly. Right. Like you have, maybe that's a stipulation, right? That you have to go out and participate in these other events, and you have to be, those teams have to be participating there, thus creating a value for EFG, giving teams something to play for, which is a win, giving them something to spend their money on, which is a win. Like it's it creates a cycle, which is great. Love that. Question the morals, but regardless, this is the reality of things. Here we are. It can't just be the Esports World Cup. So again, I want to kind of attack that narrative because I do think everybody's like correctly tunneling on that, but also the club program isn't specifically the end all be all for the World Cup, right? This money doesn't necessarily have to be targeted at that alone, I think.
Yes.
So that's important. Yeah, I don't, as maybe as hard as it is to swallow, I can't expect too many more orgs to be stepping in unless, like you mentioned, M80 and either, bow out early, or as we get closer to the Esports World Cup, end up bowing out. Or
that makes no sense for them, right? Because like that,
right,
for those orgs, those are the teams that are actually legitimately capable of getting some points on the scoreboard, right?
Yeah.
Like just getting, I think they ranked down to top 16. Maybe I'm making this up. I'm not sure if. Yeah, in terms of like getting into the money, I think I recall someone or some list saying like top 16 teams will receive club championship money. I'm not 100% sure if that's the case, right? But yeah, it's there's some utility for those orgs to keep them around. I mean, they're here already. Like especially Ents is not putting a lot of money in, so yeah, that's going to be interesting.
Mm-hmm. The return there, super good. Is there any? And this is a complete ignorant question. Oh, good.
I didn't realize they actually announced that the prize pool for Overwatch 2 was actually going to be 1 million. So now it's more than just a rumor. First place is 400k. That just came out 4 hours ago. Well, we previously only had the the rumor from the leaked thingy, and that's like the 1 million. It would have been kind of funny for it now to be 3 million, and for Gamba to go, oh shit, because then the top team accordingly would have been 1.2 million, and now we're talking about a lot of different money.
But you still gotta win, right? That's still
hard.
Yeah,
no, he didn't calculate with them win, but like basically every value 3x here looks a lot different.
Sure,
even though it's still not great, but like
that makes you reconsider at least for a second.
Yeah,
definitely. I think it's a good start. It's something that people can shoot for. Is that again, is the World Cup alone going to prop up Overwatch?
But by the way, like they have this tagline saying that the Esports World Cup money is going to be life-changing. To who? Which life is going to be absolutely changed?
I mean, it is
by the prize money,
but not in the scope of esports. When you have like TI in the past running around with like $15 million prize pools, like
I think that
if you want to give me 100K, like that'd change my life personally. Please.
I mean, the thing is, you're not making 100K, right? Like there's an org split on that. Yes. There's like 7 teammates, or rather coaches at least, that you have to
agreed. Yeah.
To split with. So even if you win, you're now looking at like 80K.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about life changing. Like, yeah, it's nice, but like nobody's retiring or like getting a house.
No. Definitely. It certainly alters your existence. Is it life changing?
Look, it's a little bit like, yes, it's like snobby, and like definitely like it would improve my life as well, but like rather like we're not saying that shit about like ESL1 Cologne. that it is life-changing money, right?
100%. But that's the optics, You could, and it would be sexy for people who don't know.
Yeah.
Just there's a pill that you have to swallow, having to write that as a marketing team to be like, oh, I don't know how we're gonna get away with this. Like,
yeah,
it's a
TI was
colorful
actually
use
that,
of
right?
language.
Like TI
100%.
made you a millionaire overnight.
Yes. Again, you were looking at like, I mean, I want to say there was like tens of millions for first place alone, just for first place. And yes, that is a team.
Yeah, I think
I want to say it was like 14, right? 14, 16. I feel like those numbers.
I think the top TI total prize pool was 40 million. Usually the first place is at least 40. Wait, so for Overwatch, if 400k is first place, that's 40%. 40% of 40 millions are 16 million. 16 divided by whatever, like you're still a millionaire. Definitely, you're probably 100%. Like 2.5 deep, right?
Yep.
Just based on winning TI. So,
and I mean, like you have people even coming out in content and talking about how like TI has like changed their life.
Yes,
that's
So like as you can see, like 2021 had 40 million. The ones before 34, 30, 25. Just so like if especially viewers are looking at this and going like, oh, every year it's increasing, and then suddenly something happened in 2022 is Dota is dying. No, they changed the way they are monetizing or like they're doing the crowdfunding, and instead of tying it to the esports prize pool, they're putting it into development, and they opened up the field, and there's much more third-party tournament organizer, and it's not all about TI anymore. It's about the entire circuit, whether you have multiple $1 million tournaments across the entire year. Therefore, like sort of like taking the edge of the TI, because there was some great elements about it, but it was also kind of unhealthy.
It was unhealthy.
That,
yes,
like
100%.
Just post TI, everything went to shit. Everyone broke apart. Like the scene was just like dormant for at least half a year until like the pre-TI events started and teams started forming and the snaking happening and whatnot, right? Like now it's a much more professionalized system that kind of requires you to be a good team across the entire year. They have like a point system, and that now everything is expanding. They're getting new third-party tournament organizers. There are arguments that it does not provide that life-changing money anymore, and therefore it has lost that special edge that TI had. Like probably if you were an esports fan at all, you were probably watching the TI final. You're probably watching the documentaries or something like that. It's not happening as much anymore based on the money being lowered, but the entire like ecosystem and what it means to be a pro player in Dota is just much more healthy now than it used to be.
It's stable, and I don't want to use the sustainability word, but this is a move that was a move for Dota to move towards a more sustainable model for its players, for the devs, for the tournament organizers, right? Like there is nothing to do in Dota until TI, until all those nameless teams, those third party, I've never even heard of you, but have really good player teams make it their way up and they've qualified for TI. Then all the money comes in, they get picked up, they get a jersey, they go out there and try to make, a fortune. Right.
Yeah.
Now if I'm understanding the Dota landscape, and forgive me if I'm wrong. Now that there's more stability, you can kind of have investments. It makes sense for organizations to be in the space long term than just for TI. It makes sense, right? Yes. Like it's more,
and that's
healthy, like you said.
That's kind of like the reason why it makes sense to talk about this is because those patterns are also relevant to Overwatch, right? Where like look at what Twisted Minds is doing with Overwatch Championship Series right now. They're really phoning it in. Like they would have probably like the way the tournament went, they could have totally not qualified for Dallas based on the tournament. And the circuit points. So now it's kind of the situation where, like, they got in, but like, how well are they really realistically going to perform? They're probably realistically one of the bottom two performers that are going to be.
Could be, yeah.
That's
I think they'll
does.
put up a fight, but again, to support that argument, we talked about this, when it happened. But they also signed Kellen and Vigilante, which they can be played at Dallas or after Dallas.
No,
Correct me
after
if I'm wrong.
Dallas. Yeah.
After Dallas.
Only
Again,
for Esports World Cups. They only care about that,
exactly.
right? Like, so
Right. The moves that are being made by some teams, to be fair, not by all teams, but some teams, do point to a trend that the Esports World Cup is, in very loose terms, big bunny ears for audio listeners, the TI of Overwatch. And we've just got done talking about how the marquee sign of the international isn't necessarily super healthy. So how does Blizzard, how does, EFG spread that money out a little bit better in maybe even later this year to make that make sense for teams?
Yeah.
That's the big question.
Brother, I'm so
Blizzard.
scared seeing that crowdfunding share of the Hanzo skin just be like 40K and like everything's fucked. It's that would be it just like based on it has such a way to overshadow even the Esports World Cup performances. Like if that prize pool is already atrocious, it just has the chance of just like that's the mass exodus. People will then play EWC. They will realize there's fucking nothing
here
for the rest of the year until next EWC, and it's Danzo Manifesto. Like just think of retirement galore in the aftermath of EWC.
Because there would be nothing to do as the schedule stands now. There's nothing to do after ESWC that matters, right? Overwatch World, the Overwatch Championship Series, it's something to play for, but is that going to be something that can sustain a career full time? No, it's not. It can't be, right? So there has to be something else. There has to be more. It doesn't even have to be third party tournament organizers. There just has to be more events from Blizzard. There has to be more events from EFG. I would imagine if I'm to remove my cynic glasses for a moment and look at the club program and go, okay, how do we make this money make sense? How do we make? I'm giving these teams stipends. Yes, I agree with you, Yiska, that adding money to organizations as like a influence producer, like they're the only team, they're the only like arm of the beast that you can kind of funnel money into that hasn't already been done by that group, makes a lot of sense. Is that enough? Could you keep people tied or bought in to play in another event that you've got going on? It seems to me that makes the most sense, that there's more to do that just hasn't been brought up yet.
Yeah, fair.
That's pure speculation. We'll have to see.
I don't think so, but I think there's an inference to be made there. But I don't expect there to be anything that we don't know popping up, and I think the only decisions as to what will happen will have to be made based on the viewership and the earning of. Like I'm sorry. Like you look at what in terms of like the art that's given out, and I don't believe the art team cares about esports whatsoever. I think it's a very clear signal.
Yeah.
Right. And fair enough. Like if it doesn't generate money for them and they don't have to care and they're like not, having to foster Bobby Kotick's relationships in any way anymore.
Yeah.
Right. That's unfortunately the way, like if you can argue the business case, even Microsoft will say, why the fuck would we put money into esports, right?
Yeah. I mean, that was the worry when the deal was like getting and nearing, completion. It was like, okay, we still have the Overwatch League. How do we make this make sense for Microsoft? Microsoft's going to look through those books, again, speaking past tense, and not like what they see, because there's no shot that this is making any kind of sense.
Yeah.
And one has to wonder, when was the last time that Overwatch Esports made any sense business wise?
Yeah.
You know, it's not looking so hot. Which kind of loops back to some thoughts and discussions that we've had around Blizzard's, handling of Overwatch Esports, where it's like, you don't get to have a say at the table right now. You don't have any leverage. You just hope that this thing takes off and people are interested in it. The only way that you're going to have that happen is if you start to pump money in and you get real loose with, what are they called? Like the license. You got to start handing out license to whoever wants them, whoever's going to try to put something on, because you need to rebuild the optics of this esport, because as it stands right now, nobody cares.
Sure.
And you also have to be a flag bearer in that. And right now they're not. Like you're saying, the art, it's questionable. The resources that they're providing to their own arm of the esport, it's okay. Is that what we need right now? I don't know. It's rough. It's rough.
Yeah.
I think Dallas will be a boost. I think you and I both can admit that will be, I don't know, what? Is it fair to say 2x what we got right now? Because it's a live event. Everybody's, going to be paying attention to it.
Yeah.
It's a major event. So nearing 100K maybe for a finals. It's not horrible, but is that enough to like really get people talking?
I mean, the only thing that you have to realize is, like, as far as we know, the EFG deal is a multi-year agreement. So, like, they're not going to drop OWCS next year or anything.
Of course,
that, right?
100%.
Just to be perfectly clear, like, but the question
is
a
doctor's visit. We're looking at the health of the esport as it stands right now, and it's not looking good.
It's more to say, like, is someone like Adam Adamu of Toronto Defiant going to look at the scene and go, like, I'm going to pay top dollar once again next year? Unlikely.
Well, I mean, he's an interesting case.
No, like, he basically, like, the case he outlined to me was they wanted to do their best they could and to collect data to be sure that it wasn't them that effed it, but that it is a systemic thing, that the developer has either signaled or not signaled they want to reinvest in the scene. And if not, they would have to reevaluate their position, right?
Sure.
Now, are they going a little bit big slick? I think there's also something to be said about established partnerships. I'm not sure if they have those running, from the Toronto Defiant days beforehand.
Sure.
There's something to be said about the established Toronto brands and the connections they have there, and also still having the old Toronto Ultra. I think, like, just in a vacuum, you're probably missing their decision making. Like, I saw some dumbass Reddit thread commenting on the reckless investment of Adam Adamu, and, like, if I was a shareholder, I would call for his head or some dumb shit, just disregarding all kind of context going into the decisions made towards the. I think that's a head-ass reading of the situation. Like, yes, they're one of the organizations that pay a living wage. Boo-hoo. Right? So.
Yeah, boo-hoo. I you can disagree with how, organizations run their money, but to be that, excitable about it, I think is a little much.
Yeah.
That's a bit much, I'd say. I don't know that I necessarily have always backed Toronto Defiant spending habits, but I think Adam Adamu's fine enough,
Dude, like, that organization is fucking popping the fuck off.
Yeah, they must be doing something right somewhere.
Like, they have positive books. They're like they are actually, like, one of the organizations with the largest fan bases.
Yes,
but just like the koi stuff work very well. They always have sold jerseys, for instance, very well.
They have Mad Lions, right? They're still Mad Lions.
They have Mad Lions. They're doing well in the LEC. Like, just have to objectively look at that organization and say, like, they're doing something right in navigating this situation, and they still have cash lying around, right? Like, from those returns from the Overwatch League. Which other league came back recently? Was it CDL? Yeah, CDL had a restructuring of their deal as well, right? So, yeah, I don't think they're nearly as big in the shitter as any other esports organization around. So, I mean, yeah, just like a vacuum, dumbass decision. Like, no, I don't understand like what people think like what they are realistically paying. Like, let it be like 800K a year still. Like that's like what? It's like one superstar in CS. It's fucking, not that consequential in the grand esports
I think
scheme.
In the grand scheme of esports, that's where if you were really going to start to criticize people, that's where I would start looking is like, oh, your ex League of Legends team that's signing some player for $4 million and you have what to show from it. Like that's a reckless investment, right? And we've seen that play out, but yeah, guys, Overwatch is not paying. We're barely paying a livable wage. Most teams are barely paying anything remotely bill payable, let alone, life sustaining.
Yeah.
Commendable that they are, but
and there are reasons for it, and those reasons might go away for next year, and nobody is incompetent because of that.
No. That's a safe, a measured business decision. That after this year, I think it's, I think everything that he's mentioned, it makes a lot of sense. So, yeah, no more Reddit threads, please, 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 please. Another piece of news topic, talking about Dallas loosely at least, that I think we want to get in front of, because I do suspect that there are some Timmies out there that are very excited for this, and maybe they should be, but for reasons that we'll get into. Students of the game did qualify for DreamHack Dallas. Congratulations to them. That's a big story that I hope to see plastered all across the Overwatch esports channels. I'll pin a comment on if that actually happens or not. But the team did sign Tree and Coluge, who we're going to do a quick rules lawyer check. I don't believe can be played at DreamHack Dallas, correct?
No, there's still a roster lock that only dissolves after DreamHack Dallas. Now, they could still play Face It League, of course. That's possible.
Right.
I'm not sure if you would want to dilute your practice between those two different squads. I think what you would like to do, the problem is the team as is without those two players is very unlikely to make EWC. Therefore, it's very hard, presumably, to get an esports organization to bite, right? Because that's one of the reasons you pick up an Overwatch team at this point. So it's hard to say. Like for that team, like there's an absolute possibility that this team will. Okay, there's a theoretic situation where the students of the game will just play as students of the game in Dallas, and it would make perfect sense, right?
Yep.
So yeah, I think it's kind of interesting that they made it. I think TSM probably also hoped differently. They probably saw themselves as like the third seed locked in. Of course, they were like runner up last year for stage 1. Can't imagine TSM is too happy about missing Dallas, but once again, it will presumably mostly be for them about EWC. And yeah, I think they should be the third slot from North America, unless I'm forgetting. Yeah, Luminosity. I wonder if Luminosity would even go.
How that works, yeah.
I always felt like collegiate teams were very quiet about participating in all sorts of leagues, just based on like having to compete in Saudi Arabia. I always felt like when I tried to communicate with collegiates, with communications via the specific universities, there was some reason as to why not communicate about that particular subject. And maybe I'm reading too much into it, but like, yeah, I'm interested what the situation would be for a team like Luminosity to go to Esports World Cup. But then again, like I feel like it's not an absolute given that every player will show up at Esports World Cup either, even if they do qualify. So that's going to be interesting going forward as well.
Yeah, as more details come out, it is the marquee event as it stands now. So it will be very interesting to see how this all kinds of shakes out. Anything else we want to get through?
I guess like what we can just say here. Let's go through the rumors real quick.
Sure.
Fnatic likely to pick up Yeti.
Yep.
I think like already in our episode with Chris talked about like Fnatic reaching out and sort of circling the market for the longest time. Yep. They wanted a competitive team. That sounded very much the thing. Like Fnatic is an organization that usually tries to have winning teams. It hasn't worked as well in the last couple of years. I will say, like more so in League, I think they're a little bit more competitive, even though it's not just a 2-horse race anymore in Europe. And then the CS team is super mid. I'm not even sure which. Really? Yeah. I'm not even sure which teams they would have in the other esports titles where they're realistically winning. So Yeti sort of like in that like 4th best South Korean slot.
Yeah.
Meaning
has potential.
It has potential, but it's also not going to win the biggest events, right? And that's sort of like what Fnatic is now as an organization. Then I guess that's the one rumor. I mean, they have confirmed that they will be joining Overwatch. They just haven't said with who.
Where.
And then the other one is that FTG is going to be picked up by Rock, is I think a rumor, with Izayaki and sorry, Izayaki and Checkmate still on now.
Okay.
Izayaki and Checkmate, I'm not sure if those guys actually make the team that much better. But yeah, there's a potential. They're definitely like the 3rd best team in South Korea, so that could be interesting, especially towards EWC qualification. Even though I'm not sure how they would go about qualifying for that event at this point. Are they already qualified? Wait, let me think about this. They are, right? They are by being a top 4 seed in.
Yeah.
You have to look for Esports World Cup, Eric. You can't.
Yeah, hold on.
Yep. Currently, it's Crazy Raccoons, Team Falcons, From the Gamer, and Yeti, I believe, are directly qualified.
Yes, okay, so they are already qualified. Yes, okay, because of top 4. Yes, makes sense. And Yetis as well, so they are an obvious pickup. So that's why they're also interesting for Fnatic, because they're already qualified. Right.
Now that we're on this page being the Overwatch Championship Series Asia, I think it is important to kind of loop back to the talk around Talent Esports, where you have a team like DAF doing some damage down in the lower bracket. Like, yes, didn't exist for very long, but taking From the Gamer to Game 5, like that's not horrible. And if I remember correctly, the South Korean Overwatch like coach podcast, I can't never remember the name.
Uncoachable, right?
Huh?
And they also
University. That's the Korean one.
University, okay.
Overwatch University, I think it's called. I feel like they also gave some applause to the Pacific region and being, surprisingly improved. Is there a world where maybe Talent actually reinvests in the Southeast Asian market? where they've been for forever. Never been bad, but is that enough, you think, to provide value, like being the face of Southeast Asian esports again?
Yeah.
I think maybe DAF can be picked up. I don't know. Yeah, something to think about.
Yeah.
Maybe. But yeah, nothing else too crazy. I think, I don't know, is this too crazy to say that with students of the game making, a move like picking up Tree and Coluge that possibly they've already made a deal with somebody? Is that reading too far in the future?
Maybe.
Am I on my goop?
I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't know.
Okay. Temperature unknown. Outside of Overwatch, though, what are you up to? What's going on?
Picked up some Hades too. No.
Yeah. What do we think?
I like the story less.
Okay.
I like 2 weapons. I think everything. So the weapons feel worse to me so far. I don't have all of them unlocked, but everything else is a clear improvement. Like the worlds are more fun. I dislike the last fight a little bit more than the last fight in the last game. I don't want to spoil too much. Yeah, I think it's just a better game with. Unfortunately, I feel like because I did not play Hades 1 when it came out, but rather recently, like last year, not my cooldown on that game was not really like fully down. So my saturation was already like at 30%, like, and I'm reaching the point where I'm not sure I'm going to grind out everything. Probably just going to beat the game a couple of times, and there's a kind of a twist. I don't want to spoil anything, so I'll probably just play through it a couple of times and then stop and not, speed run or whatever I did in Hades 1.
Yeah. Is there a world where like some of those rough patches get smoothed out as the game exits early access? Is that like a early access?
No, it's just like the characters are just not as enticing as the first one.
Okay. Yeah,
I think the main character is not as bantery, I would say. More understanding, yeah, I don't know. Like I and then even the other characters are sort of, the comic relief and whatnot. Not my cup of tea as much. Yeah. But that's fine. Like the gameplay is fun for sure.
Fun enough.
The builds are much more fun, I think. Like there's more.
Okay.
I think there's more boons here to customize and form builds around. It plays like every run feels like it plays much more differently than it did in Hades 1. Maybe I'm misremembering, but that's what it feels like a little bit. Yeah, and otherwise I'm also playing CS like a bunch.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, currently molding European like queues is crazy. I think I might have to also get on Faceit possibly. Because, dude, you're talking English in like 20% of matches. Everything else is just like
I believe it.
Rush B with
broken
hard Russian.
Yeah. That's something that I think American PC players in any game take for granted. Is you really don't have to think about how Europe has to communicate. Where it's like, yeah, I have this team that's like, I have 2 Finnish people, a Swede, a Ukrainian, and somebody from Croatia. And it's like, how do you communicate? Or from Spain, let's say.
The funny part is like, if those were in there, they would have at least broken English. But as soon as there's a Russian in there, they're fucking nothing.
Out the window.
Yeah. It's crazy. And
it's a unique
oh my god,
I have
dude.
to imagine.
Like time to slur is like 2.5 seconds sometimes. It's fucking insane.
The TTS in Europe goes crazy apparently.
No, yeah, like it's a Call of Duty lobby every time.
Sure, I bet.
It is actually crazy. And I'm so old for this now,
Yeah. It's like, all right.
I'm just muting. And then they are pissed that are not listening. Dude, like, I don't know why people think while I'm clutching, I want to hear their fucking Croatian drum and bass. Why, bro? Oh my god. It's so annoying. And then they're pissed when, like, you're not, when you have them muted and then you're not reacting to their calls and you're getting team shot and, like, oh my god. It's not getting better the higher up the ranks you go. It gets worse somehow. It's crazy.
Yep. I think that's one of the biggest like pitfalls that any gamer can make is like, if I just get out of my rank, it'll be better. Nope. Unfortunately not. I am actually taking a page out of your book quite literally and doing quite a bit of reading.
Oh, really? What are you reading right
now? We did talk about collectively doing the Stormlight Archive read, which I took seriously. I don't know if you did, but I did. So I just finished book 2. It was great. Loved it. Okay. Starting book 3 today, and yeah, doing some reading, enjoying and finding reading, which is nice. It's nice to wind down with. So yeah,
sure,
good shit. All right, that's 342. We will be back next week with some more content. So stay tuned. We'll probably bring you some news and hopefully have some more tangible things to talk about. So stay tuned. We'll see you next week.
Peace.